Hello everybody, my name's James, and for the benefit of those listening to the audio, you're listening to Arch James, my regular YouTube live stream, except it's Sunday night. You're probably wondering, why am I doing a live stream on a Sunday night? But there's a couple of reasons. Number one being, me and the wife are taking our boy Harry to Legoland tomorrow. Suj is on holiday, and I deemed that there's not enough info over the last week or so to deem that we need to rattle into a full-blown podcast. So I thought I'd open up the chat again to see if there's any further questions. And before I go into the questions, what we should cover off is obviously there is new information on double game week. So the announcement came on late on Friday afternoon of the double game week 34 fixtures, which are the three fixtures that we thought would go into that week. That's Liverpool against Fulham, Manchester City against West Ham, and Brighton against Manchester United. What we haven't got is an announcement on the Newcastle-Brighton fixture, which many of us thought would probably go into game week 31. It still might. As I explained in a thread I put on Twitter yesterday, we haven't yet got the announcement of the dates for the FA Cup semi-finals, despite the fact we all know that Manchester City will play Sheffield United on the Saturday. That's the weekend of game week 32. And Brighton will play Manchester United on the Sunday. That is a certainty, but it hasn't been confirmed as yet. Once it's confirmed, in theory, Newcastle versus Brighton can slot quite nicely into the Thursday night schedule. It's beginning to look like now, though, that won't happen. More likely now would appear to be game week 36 for Newcastle versus Brighton. Why 36 rather than 35? Well, it's quite simple. Brighton and Everton is on the Monday night in game week 35, which is a bank holiday Monday. BT have picked that up as a 5:30 kickoff, and that would only leave the Thursday as a possibility for Newcastle versus Brighton. Whereas the following week, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday would all be available. And there's definitely a night that following week which will feature no English team in European competition. That's because Manchester City and Chelsea are in the same side of the draw in the Champions League. Following me so far? Sure. But what if Man City lose in the Champions League to Bayern Munich? Well, it's just as likely that Brighton would play Manchester City in 36 rather than Newcastle. Manchester United versus Chelsea going into game week 37 is as close to a certainty as, well, it's nearly 100%. So it's likely to be Brighton will have back-to-back double game weeks in 36 and 37. Don't rule out the possibility of game week 31 just yet, is my advice. What I would say is the game week 29 deadline is obviously still 5.5 days away. If by the time we all go to bed on Friday night there's no announcement, then I think we can assume that game week 31 won't happen. Game week 30 is pretty much an impossibility by this stage. 32, 33 and 34 aren't possible. And as said, 35 is unlikely. So it's highly likely that Brighton will have doubles in 36 and 37. The order may be dependent on what Manchester City do against Bayern Munich in the Champions League. Hope that covers things off. I guess what it changes in my mind personally, there's a few kind of either-ors I've been considering this week, i.e. Brighton defender versus Manchester United defender. And it certainly makes the Manchester United assets, I think, a little bit more interesting. Purely because not so much for the double in 29 itself, but it's the fixtures afterwards. Brighton go to Tottenham in 30, go to Chelsea in 31, where in the same 2 weeks United host Everton and then go to Nottingham Forest. Right, let's go into the questions. Jovan Kanija is first. Says, hi James, we are going with Iheanacho for 2 more game weeks, but what about Arsenal, City and Spurs players until the rest of the season? Good luck, my friend. Well, just on Iheanacho briefly, my intention with the expectation that Brighton would play Newcastle in game week 31 would have been to take a hit for Alexander Isak. That's not quite on the agenda for me now, and it might be that I just bench boost and leave Iheanacho in there, I think, at the moment. There's not another forward that I'd be desperate to get in for specifically 29 for a hit. And I can't shake the feeling that if he does get back in the team during game week 29, I'd really like to keep Iheanacho for Bournemouth at home in game week 30 as well. I did speak to Aaron Lagle briefly on Friday, during the Zoom call that we had with our advanced tier patrons and asked him about Iheanacho. And his feeling was that he probably wouldn't start against Crystal Palace, which is the first of Leicester's doubles. But who knows what goes through Brendan Rodgers' mind. He may well change his mind on that. I don't know. But it doesn't feel like there's anything there that I'm desperate to take a hit on to get rid. So yes, probably 29. If he doesn't start either, I may bench him in game week 30. I've got alternatives or sell in 30. The plan for me would still be Tony to Haaland in game week 30. On the other assets you mentioned, Arsenal, City and Spurs. Well, Arsenal have got great value assets. I think that's stating the obvious. I think it's perfectly acceptable for those who want to bench boost this week to bench boost, particularly with the likes of Saka or Martinelli. Less keen on defensive players like Gabriel, as I've said previously. Now, of course, afterwards there's a tough run of fixtures, and for those who free hit in game week 32, that set of fixtures looks tougher. It becomes, after Leeds, Liverpool away, West Ham away, Man City away, Chelsea at home, Newcastle away, Brighton at home. And my intention is to take that on. And that's not to say that there isn't still brilliant value in the likes of the Arsenal players mentioned. There is. They've been the best team in the league. If we go against it, I think we know the risk, right? But it's probably one I want to take on. The final two fixtures are Nottingham Forest and Wolves, and subject to exactly how 37 falls with those Brighton fixtures versus City/Newcastle. I may want to reinvest in Arsenal from game week 37. I think I'd be very interested in getting them back in for 1 week final day punts in game week 38, particularly if they're still going for the title, or if it's not been clinched, or even if it has been won, they'll probably have a party, won't they? On City assets, I think we want to make a movement too. So my plan would be Haaland 30. I'd like to get an extra player in on 34 itself for City's double now against Fulham and West Ham. My plan means that's probably more likely to be a defensive player at the moment. Ruben Diaz will probably be affordable to me, but there'll be a consciousness about that subject to what City do with Bayern Munich in the Champions League. They become obviously even more interesting should they go out. And obviously if the title race still looks like it's up for grabs. And then look towards probably getting a third in for that final double as well. A note, and obviously Phil Foden's been removed from, obviously didn't play for England today in the 2-0 victory against Ukraine. Unclear at this stage how long he'll be out, but I guess in theory he could even be a doubt for game week 34, which is 4 weeks away. I think that's probably the worst case scenario. Does that make the likes of Riyad Mahrez more interesting from game week 30? It might do. Again, for those free hitting in 32, might be a little bit more interesting. Let's wait and see what the prognosis on Foden is, I think, a little bit later in the week. On Tottenham assets, it's very difficult to say. Those with Harry Kane going into game week 29, I think will probably generally be happy to keep. That's perfectly reasonable. The fact that Newcastle-Brighton fixture is very unlikely now for game week 31 adds to the appeal of Kane in that particular weekend. It's probably a shootout between Kane at home to Bournemouth, Haaland at home to Leicester with a rotation risk, and Rashford away to Nottingham Forest, also possibly a rotation risk for captaincy in game week 31. So I think Kane owners will probably want to hold till 31 and then move on. We've got this really rough 32 to 34. Newcastle away, United at home, Liverpool away. The final 4 fixtures aren't too bad, but generally speaking, it's probably a move on. A note for those who are on Pedro Porro. I know Emerson Royal limped off for Brazil last night, and Ben Davies is out for 4 to 6 weeks as well. So imagine for Pedro Porro owners, he'll get more starts. It may even be good news for Ivan Perisic as well. But the conditional comment on that at the moment is Antonio Conte is still Tottenham manager. If nothing changes in the next 36 hours, we think that Conte is going to come back to training on Tuesday. I cannot believe it's gone this far. Everybody's a bit staggered that he's not been dismissed as yet. But if we get to Tuesday and he's still in charge, I guess there's every chance he'll still be in charge for Everton. And whether you want any Tottenham assets under that situation, I don't know. Obviously, if the managerial situation changes, who knows? There may be a managerial bounce subject to if there's a permanent manager appointed, or it's probably more likely that Ryan Mason would be given the job temporarily until the end of the season. But no real interest in Tottenham assets, bar Kane. Hugo Lloris also played in a behind closed doors friendly, played 75 minutes during the week as well. So he could well possibly even come into contention for that Everton game, which is next Monday night in game week 29. OP says, hi James, is it a good idea to take out Kane for a doubler to fund Bruno, or just get Maddison instead of Bruno and keep Kane, personal circumstance. I'd ask yourself, what's your plan for game week 31? I mean, if your strategy plan is to captain Harry Kane against Bournemouth in 31, then I'd probably want to keep, to be honest, because that nullifies the extra fixture for someone else. You effectively get Kane twice in 31, right? If you don't intend to, I'd still probably be keen to move it. But Isak, I think, was the one that was, you'd look at go double, single, double. Yeah, I want to have a piece of that. And they cover 34 nicely as well. You've got Southampton at home. But it feels less of a rush to make that sort of move. Could you, for example, go Kane to Isak if you wanted to in 33? If you're free hitting in 32, Tottenham have United at home. Isak goes to Newcastle, then good run of fixtures that leads to their own double. So I think it's down to personal circumstance. What do you want to do with Kane in 31? If you don't think you're going to captain him, sure, move it on. But I'd be less keen on doing it to Isak now for a hit, for example. I think probably this week, I think probably Havertz is arguably the standout of the forwards, maybe even for this particular week. Free hitters may want to have a look at Danny Ings. It's worth saying for Ollie Watkins, he's got Nottingham Forest at home in game week 30, but I think most probably would have gone on for game week 28. So I think it's down to what do you want to do in 31, and you'll find your answer from there, I think, OP. Vishal Doshi says, wow, and Ask James on a Sunday, great day. How would your transfer strategy change if you wanted to bench boost in 34 instead of bench boost 29 while still free hitting 32, assuming you have 3 Arsenal players and Tony? Well, I don't have 3, I have 2. I have Gabriel and Saka. I do have Tony. Tony to Haaland is the plan for me, as I think it has been for many people. Obviously, there are people who've got Haaland now, and people probably want to buy Haaland 29. He himself, of course, is a potential injury doubt going into game week 29, having not appeared for Norway over this international break. His father said himself that he'd potentially be a doubt for the Saturday lunchtime game against Liverpool. I imagine City will do everything they can to try and get him on the pitch, particularly as they've got a free midweek afterwards. So Tony to Haaland's my plan, 30. How much would it change when we're to bench boost 34? Well, Arsenal got Chelsea at home, which is, I mean, it's fine. As said, their assets have proven great value. But I think there's other teams such as Leicester, got Everton at home, Newcastle got Southampton at home. Good alternatives for single players in game week 34. You could even make a case, I know there's a few that have been Brentford players. Brentford have got Nottingham Forest at home, so the likes of Raya, Henry, Tony, if he survived the 9th yellow, for example. But I think the fixtures that Tony's got from 30 to 33 would mean you probably do want to move that on. But the likes of Raya and Henry or Pinnock, me, whatever, could just sit on the bench for you. They could look quite nice in 34. It's very conceivable, isn't it, to bench boost in 34, I think, with something like Maddison, me, and who's the other one? Newcastle's have Botman. Perhaps have Trippier as well, and have 10 doublers, for example, 34. Yeah, it's perfectly reasonable, and obviously you could have Raya as part of that as well, potentially. I think for me it doesn't really work because I've got Kepa as my other goalkeeper with Raya, so would I want to bench boost in 34 with Raya and Kepa with singles? Not really. Is it also a priority change position for me? No. I've got a structured idea of what I want to do, and in my mind it's something like Haaland 30, Darwin Núñez 31 or Salah 32 free hit, probably 33 roll, and then Sam Greenwood in 34, I think, to remove one of the forwards would allow me to get something like Salah / Núñez and Diaz, take me up to 9 doublers in 34, plus probably starting Raya and Trippier. That's a rough kind of sketch plan I've got at the moment. I'm sure that will change. So to work towards a bench boost 34 is probably going to be a little bit too hard work for myself, I think, personally. I know there's others who are looking at doing that now. And I think also 36 could be a nice alternative if Brighton Newcastle double. You've got other teams again who've got good fixtures that week who we may have interest in. So Chelsea at home to Forest, considering they double in 37. They play Bournemouth the week before. Liverpool go to Leicester, that's okay. City go to Everton. United have got Wolves at home. Arsenal are at home as well to Brighton. If you did still have Harry Kane, Villa away. 36 isn't bad, and similar for 37. One of the things I was looking at, if Newcastle Brighton did go into 31, was looking at potentially having a bench boost in 34. that was 3 outfield Newcastle players and the rest as doublers, or having a quota of Liverpool players in 37 with the single at home to Villa. So I think there's alternative ways of looking at it. One of the things I've been saying over the last week or so is that I think if people run into real big problems in 29, then abort. Because I think there are other opportunities. I think for me, where I'm at the moment, probably -4 for probably Shaw and Fernandes is probably on the agenda. And bench boost with Raya, Henry, Botman and probably Iheanacho. I think that's probably still the right thing to do for me rather than singles later on. Plus, the not holding it back and just using it enables me to be able to flip my system where I go, right, I can put in the likes of Sam Greenwood and smash in more money across the rest of my squad. Whereas obviously, if I don't do that, and if I want to bench boost 34, I'm obviously not transferring in someone like Sam Greenwood. Sacrifices have to happen somewhere else. Then getting, say, Salah and Nunez, for example, for 34 becomes quite challenging. So it doesn't work in quite the same way for me, but I realise, Vishal, that for plenty of others, yeah, there's every chance it's going to be the right thing to wait. I mean, subject to, I don't know, let's say De Zerbi says on Friday, right, if Stupiñán's not playing the first game, I don't know, let's say you've got Maddison, he has a setback, you've got, I don't know, Haaland, who may not play. If there was a doubt strongly about Rashford, who we think is just resting, to be totally honest, then I think it would be a bought. And I'm not going to do it for the sake of just doing it. If I think the right thing for me is to abort that bench boost, I will abort it, mate. But at the moment, it's still going to be proceed as planned. And actually, before Friday's fixture announcement, my plan had been -8 on bench boost. Now it's probably just -4 on bench boost. Ragath says, hi James, any chance of another chip strategy podcast after all fixtures are clear for the rest of the season? I don't think it's necessary, Ragath. I don't think it's necessary. I'm probably covering bits now. I've just covered about bench boost. I think free hit for many, still 32 will be right. I know there's others looking at 34 or 37 now. All I'd say with those 2 weeks, and you can free hit in one of them, of course you can, but the core of Brighton, Manchester United and Manchester City, you're probably still going to want in both. So if you're short of them in 34 and they'll double again in 37, fine, you cover 34, but you're going to be short 37. So you're probably going to want similar teams for 34, 37. Now that may change somewhat if Brighton City ends up in 36 and Brighton Newcastle goes into 37. But then it's still the core of Brighton and Manchester United. And because they've both got doubles now, it's quite easy to get at least sort of 5 or 6 of them and build to whatever you want and keep hold of those assets going forward. Triple captain, I think probably 34. I think probably Haaland, Fulham away, West Ham at home, or Salah, Tottenham and Fulham at home. I think one or the other is probably the best of it. It's worth saying Brighton, if the double in 36 is going to be Arsenal away and City at home, or Arsenal away and Newcastle away, it's not great. So it's even viable, I think, just to have 2, maybe even for Brighton. Although there's certainly value in having 3 of them, no question at all. What does that leave us with? Wildcard. I think there's a few options for wildcarders who haven't used it. One is now, but it's difficult to probably set the balance up between 9 and 34. It would be right, if you still had the free hit as well, I think, to set that up to free hit 32. Similarly, if you want a wildcard in 30, and move to setting towards 34, so that might be putting in a couple more City and Liverpool assets in preparation for 34. Perfectly reasonable. Obviously, if you're looking to bench boost in 34, wildcard 33 is obviously optional. You could just wildcard in 34, which are essentially, you're going to book yourself. If City, by that point, you should know if they double in 37 or not. If you did wildcard then I think you're going treble Brighton, treble Man United, treble City, and then filling in the rest of the blanks, basically. So there's a few different ways to play it. I don't think that needed another podcast to cover that off, to be totally honest. We're in the late stages now. As said right at the start, I think United Chelsea 37 is almost an absolute certainty, and it's going to look like Brighton will double now in 36 and 37. But for those who might be joining in late on the stream, don't completely rule out 31 just yet. If we haven't heard by Friday night, then I think, yes, we can rule it out. Rob H says, do you think Saka to Bruno in Sky next Sunday will be a popular move? Yeah, it could well be. You've got 3 fixtures for Bruno Fernandes before Saka then goes to Anfield on the Sunday in game week 30, or I should say match week 30 for Sky managers. And obviously you can skip that a little bit longer. You could go back the following week when they play West Ham, and then you've got captaincy for the Friday night game against Southampton, then sell again. I'm in a position where I've got 4 Arsenal players in Sky at the moment, so if Haaland's fit for the Liverpool game, Saliba to Haaland, as I discussed on Wednesday, is one move in that format. And then it's probably come off one more, I think, either on the Sunday or the Tuesday, and then keep the other 2 for that West Ham Southampton fixture, and then it's probably keep one through till the end of the season. That's kind of rough plan at the moment. Gary Robinson's in, says, how much of a hit would you take to sell single game weekers Saka, Odegaard, Martinelli, Kane for 29 bench boost? I mean, in theory, Gary, you absolutely could bench boost with 3 of those players, mate. It's perfectly reasonable. Perfectly reasonable. You know me. I'm probably the wrong person to be asking because, you know, I love a doubler, right? I'd rather go for the big upside. I'm likely to sell Saka and Gabriel for a -4 for Shaw and Fernandes. It's part of the strategy at the moment. That's not to say I'm definitely going to do it. I'll make a final decision on Friday night. But I wouldn't be taking like -12s for those players. -8 tops, mate. Not -12. -8 absolute tops. I wouldn't, if you was in that position, and I'll assume you probably got 1 free transfer, I wouldn't be selling all those players. I'd certainly keep Saka, I think, under that circumstance, and I'd probably keep one other as well. And then it's take your pick. Perhaps that goes back to what I said to the previous question, Gary, about do you intend to captain Kane in 31? Might decide your fate there. Steve says, hi James, is this now your full-time job or do you still work for Suj in the packaging industry? I think that's what you said you did previously. I did work for Suj's packaging company, yes. I now work for Suj's Planet FPL company full-time. I say Suj's Planet FPL company, it's our Planet FPL company. Yes, I'm very blessed to be doing this full-time. If you want to support what we do, www.patreon.com/Planet FPL. And I'm sure the patrons are already well aware, but I've recorded with the wife this afternoon for your podcast for tomorrow. It's going to be a good 50 to 55 minutes. There's going to be some funny shit on there, I can promise you. Nasu says, hi James, is next week Thursday the last day for Prem to reschedule the games? So I thought someone would ask a question like this, so thank you very much, Nasu. So in the Premier League statement on Friday, what they said was they were going to push back the announcement of the game week 36 weekend fixtures, which originally were going to be announced, this is TV picks, for this coming week. They've now said that's going to be the week after. I think they said, I want to say April the 6th, which is the Thursday. That's correct. After the midweek fixtures of 29. And then the 37 TV picks will be the week after. Quite the reason to wait, I'm not sure, because there still won't be clarity on who goes through in the Champions League or not. So, I mean, if they're going to book themselves into having to confirm the 36-37 doubles for Brighton, then it will be Newcastle in 36 and City 37 if they book it in before City's Champions League fate is confirmed. So that's where we're at the moment. The honest expectation would be, Nasu, is that probably between now and game week 29, that could be it. There's every chance we won't hear anything more. And if we do, I would assume it would be Newcastle Brighton 31. Otherwise, I'm not expecting to hear anything else now before the game week 29 deadline. This and that 765 says, James, thoughts on Nagelsmann potentially at Spurs? Maybe someone asked this already, but I wasn't there. No, that's okay, mate. So I did speak about it a bit on stream on Friday, so I won't go into too much detail. Brilliant tactician, probably the right balance for Tottenham between young up-and-coming project manager and also big name, kind of sits in the middle quite nicely. His record at Bayern Munich was quite extraordinary, actually. Had 60 wins from 80 games or something, won away games in the Champions League this year, but it's never acceptable for Bayern Munich to be second in the league. And it seems they'd made a decision during the course of this season that he wasn't going to be long-term for them, and they wanted Thomas Tuchel. And it seems that, ironically, what's happened at Tottenham has pushed them into going to get Thomas Tuchel, as mad as that sounds. And now, ironically, Nagelsmann might be the perfect fit for Tottenham. Sometimes you get this happens. I am concerned that of why it's fallen foul for him at Bayern Munich, and there's plenty will say that he won't. And I note that there have been statements from a few Bayern Munich players in the last few days saying they're shocked, very surprised, were fully behind him. But I've also heard plenty of reports that he'd piss people off in the media. There's several reports suggesting that if you weren't in his 11, he didn't speak to you. So there's a dickhead element to him as well. Then again, most managers are probably dickheads and got a bit of an ego. So as someone put it I think on our Tottenham Slack channel on Patreon, said, would you rather have another dickhead or would you rather just have Ryan Mason full time? And you're thinking, well, yeah, I'd need that ego a little bit. So I certainly, if Nagelsmann gets the job, I won't be disappointed. He's a very, very interesting candidate. I imagine, and I'd be very, very surprised if he's not Tottenham's first choice at this stage, even if that means wait until the summer. But then he may be of interest to Real Madrid. He may be of interest to Paris Saint-Germain. Maybe a few other big jobs become available in the summer. And we shouldn't assume that Nagelsmann would definitely take the Tottenham job, but I don't think anyone is, in fairness. So he's not my first choice. That remains Roberto De Zerbi. That's not changed at all for me. But I guess, yeah, I would be content if it was Nagelsmann. Certainly I won't be disappointed. Let me put it that way. I'd be quite excited to see what would happen. Birth Media says, hi James, just remembering you advising us to pick Tarkowski over me because of the size of his forehead. On that note, what's the best and worst FPL advice you've ever received? I should point out, and those are probably, James Tarkowski, yeah, well advised James. No, that was when he was at Burnley last year. And as soon as after I'd said go Tarkowski because it was big head, Ben Mee scored for Burnley in the double game week against Tottenham, and I'm pretty sure we called the podcast Big Head Me as a compliment to that and it being wrong. So but James Tarkowski's always been a big threat from set piece, isn't he? What's the best and worst FPL advice you've ever received? Gosh, I guess best has become a slogan, which is play it your way, and that's what I always advise. People come in here and ask me questions, and I'll give my opinion because I'm asked directly. But I strongly believe in the will for everybody to play the game however they want to. If someone says to me, James, I'm going to bench boost 31, okay, doesn't make sense to me. But if that's what's best for you, like crack on, for example. And I guess the worst advice is you can't do that. There's no can't. Again, someone said to me, James, I want to buy Eric Dyer this week. I'd be like, why do you want to do that? But I don't like the word can't. If you truly believe it, you look at it, I see 3 clean sheets coming for Tottenham. Manager bounce if there is one, etc. Fine, but yeah. I think best would be, play it your way, which is very much what I do and what I advise others to do. And the worst is definitely, you can't do that. That's a nonsense. And you see that a lot where people don't understand people's narrative, don't even see the team, and they'll respond and say, you can't do that. Yeah, you can do it. Francis Logan says, my wildcard disaster thinking -8 and Mbeumo, Ward and possibly Saka for Ferguson, Everson and Bruno Fernandes for bench boost. Is it worth it? Sounds like 2 moves set just to get Bruno Fernandes in to me, where maybe you don't have the money in the bank, maybe you do, I don't know. On Ferguson, I think it's fair to say he's probably first choice for Brighton, but that doesn't lock him into playing. It's certainly benchable 30-31, which is helpful, and I've considered that as well. I mentioned going down to Sam Greenwood. It might be I go, Rich, this Ferguson's really look like he's going to play the majority of games. I'll have him sit there ready as my extra Brighton asset. Although I'd have a headache in 34, where on what I'm planning, I may still end up benching him. Yikes. Although maybe that would put me off going towards Darwin Núñez if I went down that route. And I would maybe look at a Liverpool defender instead, for example. Everson, I think it's reasonable to expect that Everson will play against Crystal Palace again, based on Brendan Rodgers' comments after the Brentford game, which we covered on Monday's pod. But beyond that, no idea. And Mbeumo is obviously going to get a run through the middle when this suspension comes up for Tony as well. Ward, I'd definitely be wanting to move on. I arguably probably prefer at the moment Ward to Steele. I know that might be a problem that comes back. Saka to Fernandes, and then what are you left with from Bumo? Like, can you get that up to even still maybe like an Isak or Watkins, Havertz, maybe something like that? But in my instinct, Francis, I'm not hugely keen on that. Nasu says, what percentage you give Brighton Newcastle going into 31 now? Ooh, low. I think we've got to say low now. So again, I absolutely don't rule it out, but it's got to be low. There's no real reason for them to have waited. The only logic to say is they haven't announced the FA Cup games. Could they come back to it? Yeah, possibly. 10-15%, I think, to be honest. PTR836 says, hi James, my question will be for West Ham defenders. Which one you prefer? Zuma for me, I think, as the power play from set pieces, etc. I think Aguerd will play as long as he comes back from international duty unscathed, etc. So I think one of them two, Zuma probably for me. I'm not sure I'd want it long term though, that's all. I think really good one for free hitters this week, potentially a West Ham player or two. But not massively keen otherwise. Addy Tor says, hi James, when do you think Spurs will sack Conte? Well, still refreshing the phone every 10 minutes to see if there's any update, and it's been very, very quiet. Even the ITKs, and that includes kind of the underground ITKs or the journalists very well connected to Tottenham, are all coming out and saying that Tottenham aren't giving anything away. And with each passing hour, it becomes remarkably more and more likely that Conte could stay in the job. My instinct is tomorrow. It's 8 o'clock now on Sunday nights. It's unlikely to be tonight. I think tomorrow something's got to be decided before he comes back Tuesday, unless they wait for him to come back Tuesday and pull him straight into the office to his face and say, off you go, mate, clear your locker. I don't know. It could be that. It could be that they want to do that and have the face-to-face talks. I guess Tuesday morning's possible as well. If he takes training on Tuesday, then I guess we got to assume he's staying for the minute. It's unbelievable. The players want him gone. That is clear from all the ITKs. They want him gone. Sagnik says, hi young man, are you the best baldy in the FPL community? Oh, I don't want to be vain, and there's lots of good baldies out there. My mate Ross, FPL Raptor, springs to mind. He's got a great shiny head, so I'm gonna say Ross, mate. Someone's gonna clip that badly, aren't they? Sagnik says that's what we've just done. Dave Lister says, hello James. I hope you and the missus and the kid have a good day at Legoland. Thank you, mate. Quick question: how do you think Spurs will do at Everton? Well, I think if Conte's in charge, it's just about a certainty that we'll get beat. It's almost impossible to answer at this moment in time. I also don't know the injury status of many of Tottenham's players, so we could be down to kind of real bare bones next Monday night. It's a game certainly that I can say that Everton should be targeting to win, no doubt about it. But let's just fast forward. Let's say Julian Nagelsmann's in charge on Friday of Tottenham, then the outlook on the game is completely different, isn't it? If Conte's still in charge, I think we'll get beat, mate. To be honest, I'd be at the point of nearly making Everton favourites if that was the case. So ask me again next week and I might have a better answer for you. But it's a mess, mate. It's a mess. If you ask me to tip it up right now, because he's still in charge, I say we get beat. I don't think we'll win there at the moment. Whether if it's Mason, then you might find me backing us for a draw, maybe. But I don't think we go down and win at the moment. I don't think these players have got it in them at the moment. Shivanand, sorry if I mispronounced that, mate, says, hi James, massive fan, love the content. Do you think Kane to United would be a good move for United and Kane? It's a good question, because I'm not convinced that it is right for Manchester United, actually. Stylistically, I think when Ten Hag gets it to what he wants, it will be high energy. And I think we have to consider with every passing year that high energy for Harry Kane comes down a little bit and stuff. But if you can surround him with lots of pace and energy, you can get around it. I'm not convinced, I must be honest. Look, if Harry Kane goes to Manchester United, which is certainly possible. Would he score goals and help them win games and all? Yeah, absolutely, no question about it. Will he be a flop? No way. Will it be right for United in terms of structure? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure about that. Many of you have heard me say several times over the last few weeks that if United come with a big bid, then Tottenham, I think, should seriously consider it so they can evolve themselves and start their own new process. Because Harry Kane, in a weird way, despite him being symbolic and so important to what Tottenham is, may restrict that stylistically a little bit over the next few years. I'm conscious of that, and that's not me saying sell Kane. Like, obviously, I don't want Harry Kane to leave Tottenham, and I feel I have to repeat that every time. But yeah, it works, but it might not be right, if that makes sense. A little bit like, to a smaller degree, obviously, but there's been plenty of questions about Haaland this year, right? Phenomenal season, credible goal scoring. Are Man City better? The jury's still out a little bit, isn't it? And it might be a bit like that for United as well. That's all. 79 Madrileno says, is still nailed on. Raya or still for the long haul, Alisson as a punt? Well, I don't think you'd go to Raya now. I think it was one for those wildcard in 26 or buying 27, considering the 28 fixture as well. It was then. I don't think Raya would be top of agenda now. Their fixtures aren't great for the remainder of the season, though it should be said they do cover 32 and 34 nicely with respective home fixtures against Villa and Nottingham Forest, where it could be useful for you. But I don't think you'd go to Raya new now. Maybe you're asking that because you want to move Raya to still. I'm not sure. Again, like, that's not on my thought process this week. Admittedly, it would be a hit to do so. He's still nailed on. I see no reason why Steele won't start Brighton's first game in the double against Brentford. I'd say he's probably safe for the double. I have long suspected that at some point before the end of the season, Sanchez will come back in. Then what? Then you've got yourself blocked when maybe you want 3 Brighton players. Steele could play every week till 35, right? And Sanchez plays the last 3 game weeks and you're like, what? And that'd always remain a concern. Yeah, if Steele and Everson obviously stayed in the teams all season, then what brilliant value, right? You've got 2 goalkeepers for like 7.7 or something. Couldn't argue it. Alisson as a punt, I really don't mind. The only thing I'd say about that is I'm not keen on obviously spending too much money on that. Someone like Steele becomes better if you're pairing that with an Alisson, because frankly you will always pick Alisson bar those weeks where Brighton have the doubles. So Alisson would run through for you and obviously play 32, double 34, brilliant. Then you make your decision on Steele right at the end maybe, but then in that case you probably arguably even pair it up with Everson and then come back for the third Brighton player. Might even be better. So I'm not massively keen on any of them. I think if I was wildcarding this week, I'd strongly consider Alisson. But to be honest with you, I think I'd end up with De Gea, actually. Colin Bugler says, hit the like before you go, people. Yeah, that'd be truly appreciated. There's probably about, 25% of you have hit the like button who are watching live. Doesn't cost anything, guys. Smash a like, be truly appreciated. Thank you. Mad Shook says, hey James, all the love, need a goalkeeper to bench boost 29. Where do I go? Raya is the second. I presume that's meant to be second. No Man U, no Chelsea defenders in my team. De Gea. Yeah, just fix that long term, doesn't it? I think the only caveat is obviously, again, depends on your strategy. I have blinkered because I'm going to free hit 32. If you're free hitting 32, I think that's ideal. You've got 29 double, good 30, 31, 34 double, 37 double, good 35, 36, 38 fixtures. That's the one, isn't it? I think. Hafiz says, is Ings nailed in the West Ham starting 11? He had 3 starts, played 85 plus minutes. Nailed? No. And it should be noted, obviously, Gianluca Scamacca, who you may have seen come on for Italy on Thursday night, is fit again. We certainly think that Danny Ings is first choice. I'm not a fan of the word nailed, mate, because if you ask me to guarantee you that Danny Ings is going to start twice, I can't. Were I free hitting this week, I would very strongly consider him. Beyond that, wouldn't be massively keen unless you had a plan to go, right, I'm going Ings this week, I'm moving Ings to Haaland in 30 if you got the money in the bank, for example. Fine. As a long-term pick, Not keen. Another one who might cover you nicely for 32 if you're not free hitting then, so go to Bournemouth away. The double 34 includes a trip to Man City. How good is it? They got United, Liverpool before that in 33, United after that in 35. Yeah, short term, fine. Long term, no. Barry Coleman says, "Hi James, what's your target for overall rank this season?" I would still hope for top 100k. It's probably quite difficult now, to be honest, but I wouldn't rule it out as a possibility if I finish the season quite well. So that would be the goal. Perhaps it's unrealistic. What am I, 450k? I think something like that at the moment. So that might be a bit ambitious. But I got taught as a child that you'd better to aim high and failed, and aim low and succeed. It's an old Bill Nicholson quote, that, mate. And if you don't know who Bill Nicholson is, I suggest you get on Google. Akshay says, Son become an option if Nagelsmann becomes manager. He might, but do them fixtures look good enough to consider it? No, I mean, not at the moment. Like, could he? Yeah, sure. He's had a terrible season, mate. He certainly is one that needs a different manager. Heather says, "Hey James, would you do -8, -12 to bench boost in game week 29 to have 12 double game week players? Haaland, Saka and Kane are my single game week players. My plan has been bench boost 29, wildcard 34, free hit 37. Thanks for the content." It sounds to me, Heather, that your situation might be better to wildcard in 33 and bench boost 34, possibly. Seems like a struggle to get where you want to get to. I'm not a fan of -12s. I know for very aggressive players they can work out, etc. But I don't think there's stuff out there this week that looks that great. I mean, I'm looking at forwards, like who would I get for Iheanacho, and I'm almost just going, gonna leave that probably. So not keen on massively up. -8, fine. But would you not just be better off just playing those single game week players, leaving the shit on the bench, and coming back and perhaps wildcarding in 33? That might be right for you, Heather. Remember, like, what's right for me isn't like what's right for you. I think right for me currently, subject to injury news this week, is still to pull the trigger and bench boost this week. If I had a wild card now, would I think differently on it? Probably not. I'd still in a right position, but it doesn't sound like you are, Heather. So I'd probably leave it. Heather goes on to say the transfers will be to replace players with issues like Saliba. Yeah, but you could just bench it. Just bench it and leave it potentially. So I think for you, Heather, without seeing your team, I'd probably consider wildcard in 33, mate. Alistair Coper says, "Evening, mate. Surprised this hasn't been asked, but I didn't see it in the comments. Saka's Bruno for -4 is really tough to decide on faults." Yeah, exactly that. What I'd say from my perspective, Alistair, and I think probably has been covered a lot over the last week or so. I feel like I've covered it on every piece of content I've done recently, and I know you listen to most of it. If I sell Saka and Gabriel for Bruno and Shaw for a -4, which one's actually the -4? So I've got loads of money in the bank. Do they both equate as -2s if I do them at the same time? Because I probably would be. So that makes it easier for me. If that's your only decision, -4, I think my take on it is, does Bruno definitely outscore Saka by 4 points or more in 29? Nah, can't guarantee that, mate. Can't guarantee that at all. You've seen Bukayo's goal today, I'm sure. Another great goal. It's just something else in his armoury. He's become an absolutely super player, and he's got that in his locker now. But I think for me, I would justify it with what's to come afterwards as well. Those two United fixtures, 30, 31, and the fact I'm free hitting in 32. Now, if you're not free hitting in 32, that becomes far less attractive. Far less. Because you'll want Bukayo Saka in 32, right? Obviously, if you're doing that and then you want United players for 34, is another extra fixture for Bruno in 34, while you know Saka is persisting with these difficult fixtures. Can he return well in them? Of course. The lad's becoming world class, right? So I would justify it, I think, by saying what's to come afterwards. And ask yourself this: if you don't take a -4 for it this week, would you take a -4 for it next week? And that may help the answer. Because each rolling week on this, there's every chance you're going to want to make that move at some stage. And that's what's pulling me more and more. Just do it, James. Just do it. And there's a little bit of, I've just had the 18 points from Saka. Thank you very much. That's gambler's fallacy fault, that is. Dan says, only chip left is wildcard. Obviously team dependent, but any inspiration on best time to use it? So if it's only wildcard left, probably 34 as Heather was playing. But Heather's got the bench boost, whereas obviously you haven't, Dan. So, yeah, probably on 34, where you can just focus on these little bits now. Make sure you cover yourself nicely for 32. And then I think probably wildcard 34 for your last stretch. Treble Brighton, treble United, treble City, probably treble Newcastle, to be totally honest. Little dabble of maybe something Chelsea, perhaps a bit of Arsenal still, maybe even something like Zaha for the run-in, good Palace fixtures. Go with that. James Maddison, another one maybe. Maybe someone will emerge. Maybe Odsonne Edouard will be playing every week for Palace and suddenly look like a good option, like he doesn't right now. But yeah, I think probably if I had it left, Dan, subject to if your team's a mess now, but if it's not, then 34, I think, mate. Joseph Robinson says, gloating a bit here, James. Your thoughts on Spurs only winning thrice in 60-plus league visits to Anfield since Wooden Studs and Danny Blanchflower? But I have seen Tottenham win at Anfield. Listen, Anfield's not the only bad place we've got a bad record, right? In the Premier League era, what have we won at Anfield? Yeah, probably maybe twice in the Premier League, I want to say. 93, 94, and I think 10, 11. I think that's probably it, isn't it? I think what have we got? Maybe 3 wins at Old Trafford, 2 at Arsenal, 1 at Highbury, 1 at the Emirates. So it's not exclusive to Anfield. 1 win at Stamford Bridge in that time. The Etihad we used to win at quite a bit, but not that much since the money. Although we've had better records there than most, I accept. So it's just a Tottenham problem, Joseph. It's not that much of an Anfield thing. My dad was there. This is a true story, Joseph. Tottenham hadn't won. I think Tottenham won at Liverpool in 85. I want to say, I might have the year wrong. Garth Crooks scored. And my dad was there. And it was the first time Tottenham had won at Anfield since the Titanic sank. And he was there, mate. So, and I was there at Anfield when Klinsmann scored in front of the Klopp. He wasn't there. Front of the Kop in the quarter-final in 95. So I've only been to Anfield once. And I've won, mate. That's why I'm not going back. No, I do mean to go back. I would have gone, to be honest, this year if I wasn't watching such shit football, mate. But you'll destroy us in a few weeks, mate. We won't be winning at Anfield this year either. Lee Sherwood says, hey, man, my brother is sitting with this bench. Ward, Martinelli, Andreas, Badiashile. Would you take a hit to bench boost out or wait to 34? The caveat with that's important is that bench wouldn't be any useful to you in 34 either, other than Andreas Pereira would then have a double, so you could maybe just leave that be. The rest isn't useful to you either. Badiashile goes to Arsenal. Martinelli's okay. Right, it's Chelsea at home's fine. Ward, depends on the circumstance. Everton at home's a decent fixture. Is he back in, isn't he? I don't know. That'd be a wait though, mate. A wait. You could literally be looking at that. Martinelli at home to Leeds and Andreas away to Bournemouth. Sorry, if I said away, I meant at home. Martinelli at home to Leeds, Andreas away to Bournemouth. That could be it, couldn't it? You wouldn't bench boost that normally, right? So, no. Alex Ball, my friend, hope you're well, says, morning from New Zealand, James. Assuming we get through the international break with no major injuries, do you prefer Odegaard to Bruno or Maddison or Odegaard and Saka to Bruno and Maddison for -4? Thanks, fella. Yeah, keen on Maddison. It's another one where I think 30 can justify it with the Bournemouth home fixture. And also, he's a great single game weeker if you end up keeping, which you don't have to compete with 34. He's got one of the best fixtures, 33, which is a rough week. Leeds away. If you're not free hitting 32, that's a good fixture as well. Wolves at home. 31 subject to what you've got. I mean, could you still play him away to Man City? Sure. There was 9 goals in that fixture last year. City won 6-3. I'm sure he returned in it. So, depends what you're doing going forward, but the answer's probably both, Alex, if I'm understanding the question correctly. I'd take the chance on both. Appearance points pays back the hits, you would think. And then it's a case, can the 2 players physically outscore the 2 Arsenal players? I'd do both, I think, Alex. Owen Wilson, but I have a favouritism for the doublers, and you should always acknowledge that. Owen Wilson says, what is going on at Spurs? Have we heard any more news as to why Conte is still there? Seems bizarre. Thanks for your question, Owen. I kind of covered it, so I'm not going to repeat that, as I'm going to end this stream before 8:30, and it's 8:22 at the moment. Owen says, what City defender would you go for at this point? I've got De Gea, so don't want to move him to Ederson. I think a City defender is kind of a must from 34 onwards. So, as I'd said, part of my strategy at the moment would be Diaz, but that decision probably won't be made itself till 34. And therefore, it might not be affordable. It might be I come down for something cheaper. Who knows? Kyle Walker might get injured and Rico Lewis is playing every week by then, right? So, part of my strategy at the moment is aim for the best of it, which I think is probably Ruben Diaz, but not a priority at this minute. Immortal Technique says, hi James, as it's Sunday, do you consider it acceptable to have mash with roast dinner? Is it acceptable? Yes. Would I be happy about it? No. No, I would not be happy about that at all. Ready Can Dance says, hi James, what do you think of Ferguson as a player and an FPL option? The reason I like him for FPL is because he gives you another Brighton attack without using another midfield spot. Correct, but I think heading towards 34, there should be a consciousness that you don't end up with 8 attacking players with a double and you still end up benching him. That's a possibility, because that's something I looked at potentially. And obviously, if you get an injury there, great, you're perfectly set. Don't worry about it. I think he's a super talent. I think, if Tottenham did sell Kane, they should be all over it as a long-term prospect. He's got all the tools to essentially be the next Kane, if you will. He looks an absolutely super talent. I've been very impressed with his adaptability recently. He played 2 different positions in the 2-2 draw at Leeds, for example. Really good player. Good finisher. A little bit like with Bellingham. I'm not comparing the 2 players. But same as when I first started seeing Bellingham, you went, there's no way he's 18. And that's how you feel when you watch Ferguson as well. Like, he must be older. And that's only meant as a compliment. Julio says, would this be turned into a podcast later? Yes, I will release it as an audio. Probably won't be till about 10ish, to be totally honest. But yeah, it'll be available as an audio later. FPL Glaston says, no question, just wishing you a great day off. Thank you very much. Rich F says, James, best kebab shop in Barnet in your opinion? I've just moved here. In Barnet, I'm not familiar with the kebab game round there, is the only answer I can give you. Other than Suj, is it Golden Palace Suj keeps getting from? It is good. I think it's Golden Palace in New Barnet he keeps going for. Round here, you got Mama's Pizza or Blue Mermaid. He's all right for a rough kebab, as rough kebabs go as well. But that's Enfield way, mate. FPL Glasto says, Julio, yes, all Ask James a podcast for you as after he finishes. Yes, that's very, very true. Renarid9, my friend, brilliant guest appearance on our Patreon podcast on England on Friday. Thank you, mate. Says, evening all, enjoy your day off tomorrow, James. Thank you. FPL Josh says, my next week, Raya, Henry, Trippier, Chill. I'm not reading your whole team, mate. I mean that with the best respects to you, Josh. I love you loads. Thanks for the question. But I'm not reading out your whole team, mate. It's absolutely awful for the listeners and the viewers. But good luck with your bench boost, mate. FPL Harry says, what game week do we think Manchester United will be on the beach? Double win 37 makes him want to buy lots. But if they are still in Europe, it may be rotated if they are secured top 4. And that's absolutely correct. But think of it this way, Harry. Let's say United get to the Europa League final. And that's the Wednesday after game week 38, okay? So I think the most likely at the moment is they'll probably play Chelsea on the Wednesday in game week 37. That's the most likely scenario at the moment. Let's say they play Thursday Europa semi, Sunday in the league, Wednesday in the league. It's concerning, isn't it? But does he kind of ease them on? Bruno never gets rotated, right? He's played more minutes than any outfield player in Europe's top 5 leagues across this season. That includes cup competitions and European competition and the like. So Bruno nearly always plays. If you've got a De Gea, did they rest him for a league game? I think largely for 37, you'd probably be all right for let's say X mins 120 plus, which is still more than your normal expected. And then I think that if they're in that final and they've got Champions League wrapped up, then they rest the whole team against Wolves in 38, don't they? So the consciousness might not be 37. It's coming out of 37 if they're in the final and going, fuck, I got 3 United outfield players. So there's every chance, for example, I'd have Shaw, Fernandes, Rashford. And I'd have to factor that in that thinking. But then at the same time, Harry, if you thought that was going to happen going into 38, let's just say you didn't have, Salah, for example. If you come out of 37, you think Fernandes and Rashford ain't playing in 38, what are you doing? You've either got a great bench to cover it, or you're just going to, you're going to bench 10 million's worth of Bruno Fernandes in game week 38. You're going to smash them out, aren't you, mate? That would be my take. So, yeah, not a huge concern at the moment. It's all very what ifs. I think largely it's worth saying that particularly Fernandes nearly always plays. Someone like Shaw's a bit of a risk. That's part why one of the questions I answered earlier and said, I think De Gea, if I was wildcarding now, I'd want for exactly that reason. I think that's okay, that's cover. And Rashford will still play the majority. I guess there'd probably be a little bit more caution with him, but then also how many times this season he come off the bench and even scored and stuff. You'd just be in a position where you wouldn't be captaining him. I think in 37 it would probably be too risky, to be honest. Sorry, they've got Fulham at home in 38, not Wolves. Wolves is the other fixture. Wolves is their 36th fixture, sorry. Bournemouth is the first fixture they'd have in 37. Right, I'll leave it there because I'm on a promise to finish the stream before 8:30. That's because there's another stream about to start live. Originally, I was going to do 8 o'clock tonight, and I saw our friends Adam and Baker from Above Average FPL were going to be streaming from 8:30, so I decided to rush this forward and do it at 7:30. I highly recommend that those watching live on YouTube jump over to their channel and give them a shot if you've not listened to them before. Great lads, Cut the Tottenham fans. They're doing a special. It's their third parter on a special that they've done previously on bonus points in FPL tonight. Jump in their chat, tell them James sent you, give them a big hello, enjoy their stream, give them a thumb and a thumbs up and a like when you jump in. If you like this stuff, subscribe. Really good lads. They're going to be starting on the Above Average FPL YouTube channel in around about a minute. So I'm going to bid farewell and say to everyone, no early transfers. Remember, as always, play it your way. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening, and for the benefit of those listening to the podcast, cue music, please, man child.